This is the Social Skills Mastery Podcast, episode 262.
To really compete as a professional or business owner, you have to own the room. That's why each week I bring you hot topics, tips, and expert interviews so you can stand out in competitive places. Let's get started.
Quick question. Do you ever feel your heart racing right before a big moment? That's not a confidence problem. That's your inner critic hijacking the controls. I built Confidence on Cue to fix that. It's a 5-minute audio that resets your mind before any meeting, presentation, or interaction. It quiets overthinking, centers your energy, and helps you step in as the impactful professional people trust and remember. Your mind should be your ally, not your obstacle. This trains your thoughts, emotions, and energy to work together so you walk in composed, clear, and compelling. Grab it now at socialconfidencepro.com/switch and change how you show up in every high-stakes moment from here on out. If you still believe that doing a great job is what gets you promoted, you're already losing to people half as competent and twice as loud. The corporate world doesn't pay out on effort. It pays out on perceived value, and perceived value has shockingly little to do with how hard you work and almost everything to do with how visible you are. And if that sentence annoys you, well, good. That annoyance is the crack in the story that's been keeping you under-recognized, under-promoted, and overworked. Now, you may feel invisible, and you may have years of evidence that other people get the credit and the praise and the bigger titles while you're the one keeping projects from falling apart. But you aren't invisible. You're simply playing a low-pitched game in a very loud arena. My goal today isn't to convince you to become some exaggerated extrovert, but rather to teach you how to step up and stand out in extroverted workplaces while staying fully, unapologetically yourself. Let's start by taking a close look at your current strategy. You work hard, you hit your deadlines, you run successful projects, your clients are happy, you fix problems before they blow up, and you're the calm, competent one everyone relies on behind the scenes. And yet the promotions, the public praise, and the high potential label seems to go to other people. Usually the ones who talk more and show up louder and have no problem reminding everyone what they did. Now, your brain explains this away by saying, well, my work should speak for itself. And while noble, it just isn't true. Your work doesn't in fact speak for itself, and that thinking is what keeps you stuck, especially in a lot of type A, fast-paced environments. People speak for their work, and the ones who do that more often are the ones who get seen as leaders. If you identify as introverted, thoughtful, or not naturally outspoken, your brain is going to work differently in group settings. In a meeting, when someone asks a question, your mind doesn't just cough out the first thing it can grab. It runs a whole internal simulation. The context, the risks, what was tried before, who might be affected, whether your comment adds value, whether someone else already knows this, and how it might be received, and if it could possibly be wrong. And by the time you finish that thoughtful internal vetting, 3 more extroverts have said something. And maybe what they offered is surface level compared to what you were thinking. But here's the thing. They said it out loud. And that alone positions them as being more engaged, confident, and leader-like in the eyes of the room. They're being credited not for better thinking, but for visible thinking. Now, of course, your brain makes that mean something about you, right? It tells you, I'm not quick enough, or I don't belong in this room, or I'm more of a behind-the-scenes person. And those aren't neutral observations. They're identity statements. It's like saying, I am blank. And because your brain loves consistency, it'll keep offering you those very same sentences. And the only way your self-talk will change is if you do. You have to be the person who recognizes the genesis of the problem and does something about it. So you can have the recognition that you deserve. That's what we want for you. So when you're in your head waiting for the perfect moment and telling yourself you'll speak if you have something truly brilliant to say, that standard, it must be brilliant and new and airtight or I won't say anything, is exactly what keeps you silent and invisible in environments that reward participation and presence, not perfection. This is a good place to begin your social identity shift. And you can start by knowing your personality isn't the problem, but the unrefuted story you tell about your personality is. You may be saying, I'm introverted, I'm not a talker, I'm better one-to-one, or I hate drawing attention to myself. Those statements feel like facts, but they're really nothing more than sentences that you've rehearsed for years. What I want to express to you is that you can keep every bit of your thoughtfulness and depth and still choose a different identity at work on purpose. What if instead of, I'm the quiet one who gets passed over, you chose, I'm a thoughtful leader who's learning to make my value easy to see? You see, identity isn't fixed. It's a choice that you're reinforcing with your own repeated actions. And oftentimes, it's not even introversion that's to blame. You may have been taught to be humble and to not brag and not to outshine maybe your siblings or others in the classroom and not to speak unless you had something truly important to say. Then you enter a fast-paced type A workplace, constantly in motion, where people who speak up early and often are perceived as being more engaged and more leadership ready. If you carry the rules given to you by adults in your formative years into your workplace without updating them, you're creating a painful disconnect. And there you are, feeling like you're choosing between being authentic and being visible, and making a choice between staying true to your values and getting ahead. And that's a false binary. Either I'm quiet and overlooked, or I become loud and fake. That's what keeps you stuck. The key is to stop seeing it as an either-or situation and start seeing it more as a transformation. You're not betraying your values by learning to speak the language of visibility. You're making your values shine in a system that doesn't automatically recognize reserved excellence. Visibility isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about making your value easy to see. It's a big difference. That's it. There's a very specific kind of frustration that I see again and again in smart, capable, yet socially reserved high achievers. They're not failing, and they're not incompetent, and they're certainly not lazy. They're just not visible. Not literally invisible, of course. They're in the room, and they're doing the work, and what's more, they're often the most prepared person there. And still, they're overlooked and passed over and under-recognized. What's fascinating is that this problem, it's been studied and written about and named, just not always in the way people think. Like prominent thought leaders have written about presence and status and influence and psychological visibility and social signaling for years. Just think about Amy Cuddy, who brought presence into the mainstream conversation, not as bravado, but as the ability to show up in a way that others can feel. Or Adam Grant, who often speaks to quiet achievers and introverts, just explaining that contribution alone doesn't guarantee recognition. Visibility is about being seen differently, and excellence without visibility often leads to stagnation and unmet needs and high-cost turnover. So the language of visibility that I mentioned a moment ago isn't self-promotion or arrogance, and it's not being loud or dominant or quote-unquote on all the time. The language of visibility is more or less a social operating system of influence. In other words, it's a set of verbal, behavioral, and energetic signals that tell other people that this person is confident in their value, and this person belongs at this level, and this person is safe to listen to and follow and invest in. And most socially reserved professionals were never taught this language. They were taught a different one, the language of keep your head down, don't interrupt, wait until you're 100% sure, let your work speak for itself. And that language translates well when you're in school. And it works early in your career, and suddenly it stops working. It stops working because workplaces don't reward effort. So visibility is perception, and perception is learned behavior. So let's talk about a few ways to learn the language of visibility, especially if you're a smart, reserved, analytical, or introverted professional who knows that you deserve more. Now, first, you can learn visibility by managing your thoughts, not through clever tactics. Most people think visibility is about what you do. You speak up more, you post on LinkedIn, you raised your hand, but visibility always starts with what you think. If your thought is, I don't want to sound stupid, your behavior will be cautious and minimized and retracting, correct? And if your thought is, my perspective has weight, your behavior naturally expands. Can you see why visibility isn't an action problem, but it's a belief problem? Next, you learn visibility by speaking about outcomes, not processes. Analytical people love a good process. And if you're a deep thinker, you likely dig into how things work and why things failed and what variables are involved, right? Now, on the other hand, visible professionals, they speak in outcomes. They would say something like, here's what this impacts, or here's why this matters now, or here's the risk if we don't address it. It's the same intelligence, it's just a different language. So know that visibility isn't dumbing yourself down by any stretch of the imagination. It's translating your brilliance and your acumen into decision-level relevance. It's a big difference. The next thing is, and this is big, you learn visibility by occupying space before you feel ready. Now, this is where a lot of people stall. You see, they think confidence comes first, then visibility. But confidence is a result, not a requirement. So visible people speak at 70% certainty, while invisible people wait for 110% certainty. And workplaces, by and large, don't reward certainty. They reward presence in the moment. What I'm saying is, you don't become visible by waiting until you're comfortable. You become comfortable by being visible. And you can learn visibility by understanding social timing, not just content. This is one of the most undertaught skills. It's not just what you say, it's when and how you say it. Let's say, for example, the language of visibility includes entering conversations early instead of late, and framing ideas before a debate begins, and building on others' ideas instead of correcting them, and making your contribution additive to a thought, not competitive. This is why socially skilled professionals rise faster, even when they're not the smartest in the room. You can say they understand the flow and not just the facts. And the last point I want to share with you about visibility in particular is you learn it by deciding who you are before the room decides for you. This is the deepest layer, because if you don't define yourself, the room will. Do you want them to decide for you that you're quiet or supportive or the behind-the-scenes type? That you're dependable but not leadership material? My friends, visibility is an identity choice. It's deciding, I am someone whose voice belongs here, and I don't need permission to contribute, and I can be calm and commanding. And when your identity shifts, your behavior follows. And when your behavior shifts, perceptions change. This is why I say that visibility isn't a personality trait. It's a learned language. And once you learn it, you don't have to become louder. You become clearer and steadier. Not because you changed who you are, but because you finally learned how to let the world see you. Right now, your value's hidden inside your head and your files and inside your after-hours work that no one really sees. Well, maybe one or two close colleagues see it, but your boss's boss doesn't, and the decision makers don't. So when it's time to allocate recognition and promotions and stretch assignments, they look to the people who have been consistently, visibly in the conversation. It's said that 47% of socially reserved high performers report deeply negative associations with visibility and self-promotion. But what happens is your brain shows you every obnoxious colleague you've ever seen hog the spotlight and says, that's what visibility looks like. No thanks. But that's just one extreme version. You don't have to be that person. Self-promotion done well is informational. It's not boastful. It's you giving your organization accurate data about what you do and the impact that it has. When you send your manager a brief weekly note that says, quick update, I led the debugging on the X issue, which removed a blocker for the client and kept the timeline intact, you're not bragging. You're reporting reality in a way that helps them manage, prioritize, and advocate for the team. That's responsible. It's not slimy. Let's get very practical about the most triggering scenario, which is meetings. Dreaded meetings. Right now, your default thought in meetings might be something like, I have to say something mind-blowing, or I might as well not talk at all. Or if it's not brand new, it's not worth saying. Or if I stumble, they'll think I don't know what I'm doing. That self-created mental standard adds pressure and anxiety and physical stress and often complete silence. Instead, you can deliberately give yourself new thoughts to practice. My job is to contribute, not to perform. A simple, clear point is often more valuable than a complicated one. And it's okay if I pause before I speak. I still get to speak. These are instructions to your brain in the moment when it wants to shut you down. If your brain loves structure, then give it one. Before you walk into a meeting, decide, I will contribute once. Not, I'll blow them away, or I'll dominate the room. Just as simple as, I will make one clear contribution. You can even preload it. Look at the agenda in advance and choose one area where you might have insight. And the second thing is to state your main point in one sentence. The biggest risk I see is X, or the main opportunity here is Y. And then support it with one example or bit of data. We saw that last quarter when blank. And close with either a recommendation or an invitation. That could sound something like, so I'd recommend that we do X, or I'm curious what others think about prioritizing that first. You don't have to sound scripted or stiff. The structure just gives your brain rails to run on so it doesn't default to silence. Now, we need to talk about your nervous system because for many of you, the issue isn't logic, it's physiology. And when you even think about speaking up, your heart rate spikes and your chest tightens and you feel heat in your face. And your mind may go a bit blank, but don't take that to mean that you're not meant to speak. It means your body has coded visibility as being dangerous. Maybe historically, your being visible did lead to criticism or embarrassment at some point. But in your current context, speaking once in a status meeting, well, it's not life-threatening. You can start retraining your nervous system, not by waiting to feel calm and confident, but by showing it through repeated small interjections that you can speak while feeling activated and still be okay. So think along the lines of, discomfort isn't danger, and I can feel this and still contribute. Then follow through on your one contribution promise. You speak, your voice might wobble, and you might feel awkward, and that's okay. You just collected evidence that you can survive visibility. And as you practice this, your identity starts to shift. Right now, you may secretly think, I'm not leadership material. I'm a workhorse, not the face of anything. And that belief alone will shape how you show up. But again, what did we say about leadership? We say it's not a personality type. It's a collection of behaviors. It looks like taking responsibility, communicating clearly, and influencing the direction the team is headed. And none of that requires you to be the loudest person in the room. In fact, your personal leadership style might look like being the one who calmly synthesizes a chaotic discussion and says, here's what I'm hearing and what I suggest we do next. It might look like being the person who names the risk no one wants to say out loud. And it might look like being the colleague who advocates for the client or the junior team members who aren't in the room. Those are leadership behaviors, and the more you see them as such and own them, the more others will as well. So to help your organization see you differently, you can start by just making a few deliberate micro-social identity shifts. First, commit to that one contribution per meeting rule. And over a month, that alone dramatically changes how often people hear your voice. Then start a weekly impact recap for your manager. Not a long memo, just a short note with 3 bullets. What you did, why it mattered, and the outcome. Now you're training your manager to understand your value, which is essential if you want them to advocate for you when you're not in the room. And third, practice simplifying your language. Deep and critical thinkers often overcomplicate their explanation, which makes them feel less confident and makes others tune out. So start sentences with the main thing to know here is, then give one clear point. And if they want more, they'll ask. Then intentionally ask for visibility building opportunities instead of waiting to be picked. You might say to your manager, I'd like to take on more of the client-facing updates this quarter. Or next time we present this project, I'd like to own the section on X. You're not demanding, you're just signaling your readiness and desire to grow. And then clean up your self-talk when you inevitably slip back into old patterns. There'll always be days when you stay silent, even though you promised yourself that you wouldn't. Or when you speak and then ruminate and replay your words in your head all afternoon. Instead of using that as proof you're not meant for this, use it as evidence that you're in the arena and you're practicing. And just tell yourself that was one rep, and I'm becoming someone who shows up more, even when it's uncomfortable. That's how you build a new normal for yourself. All of this comes down to one core shift. Deciding on purpose that being seen is a part of your job. Not because you want ego strokes, but because your work and your ideas and your leadership can't impact anything if they stay locked in your head and buried in the back end of the project plan. You don't need to become loud, and you don't need to perform a fake version of confidence. You need to be willing to bring your strengths into the light where decision makers can actually perceive them. That means valuing visibility as much as you've been taught to value humility. And it means translating your diligence into presence and letting go of the fantasy that if I just work hard enough, someone will discover me. And instead of choosing to show up like someone who's already worth noticing. You're already the person who thinks deeply, who cares about quality, who sees risks and opportunities others miss, whose clients trust them, and who teammates rely on. The only thing missing is that the room doesn't consistently see that. You can change that, not by becoming someone else, but by changing what you practice. One sentence in a meeting, one clear recap, one request for opportunity, one breath before you speak instead of staying silent. Stepping up and standing out in an extroverted workplace is not about volume. It's about intention. And when you decide to make your value easy to see, everything about how you show up begins to change. And the way the workplace responds to you, well, that's going to change as well. Thanks so much for joining me today. Bye for now. Wait, before you hit stop, let me leave you with this. Imagine walking into any meeting, dinner, or conversation and just settling in. Not bracing, overthinking, or wondering how you're coming across. Just knowing you belong and showing up like someone whose insight carries weight and who knows the protocol and can be comfortable anywhere. If that kind of ease and confidence feels a little out of reach right now, you're not alone. A lot of high performers feel less certain in the moments when presence matters just as much as competence. And that's the gap we close. Let's talk. We'll look at what's tripping you up, what you want to feel more confident doing, and what it would take to show up with social polish and presence that matches your performance. If you're ready to feel more solid, seen, and like the leader you know you can be, head to socialconfidencepro.com/coach and choose a time. It's literally your call.